He was a cold millionaire, CEO, until a poor girl selling bottled water melted his heart. On took a sip of lemonade and said it cost too much. She told him to spit it out then. Just like that. No fear, no apology. And maybe that's when something inside him cracked. She didn't know the man in front of her built skyscrapers, that he signed deals with pens worth more than her weekly rent, but what stunned him wasn't her price. It was the way she looked him in the eye and said, "You drank it, now pay for it." Some people fall in love with beauty. Others fall when someone reminds them they still have a soul. There's a kind of heat in Austin that doesn't just rest on your skin. It presses on your chest, dares you to give up, and waits for you to break. But she didn't. Glenda, her famously ugly first movie, CEOCinderellaStories. She stood on the corner of 7th and Main, her shoes older than the sidewalk cracks beneath her, arms tanned from long hours in the sun, selling lemonade with a grin that looked like defiance in disguise. A folding table, a cooler, a stack of plastic cups. That was her empire, and for a few hours each afternoon, she became its queen. Lemonade, ice cold, fresh squeezed, $3. I take Venmo or cash, but not your pity. People laughed, sometimes stopped, most kept walking, but she never stopped calling out, never once dropped her voice. Then came the man in the suit. He walked like someone who didn't know how to be ignored. A black tie draped down a crisp white shirt and shoes that looked allergic to dust. When he paused, it wasn't to admire her determination, it was to scoff. $3 for this, he said, picking up a cup without asking. It's lemon water in a plastic cup. She didn't flinch, didn't blink, just folded her arms and tilted her chin toward him like she was about to issue a verdict. Then spit it out, she said calmly. If it's not worth $3, give me back what you drank. He froze, mid-sip, stared at her like she'd just flipped the script, which, in a way, she had. Around them, two teenagers laughed, a woman passing with her kids smiled, and he, the man who clearly wasn't used to being challenged, blinked, then reached into his wallet and handed her a 20. She didn't say thank you, just gave him the change and moved on to the next customer. But he didn't move on. He stood there for a second longer than he should have. Then, with a slight nod, turned and walked back to his black car, parked just around the corner. She'd forget him within the hour, but he wouldn't forget her. Not the lemonade, not the heat, not the girl who looked him dead in the eye and told him to spit it out. That night, in a corner office so high above the city it barely heard its own heartbeat, he couldn't stop thinking about her. Not the lemonade stand, not the sidewalk, not even the price. Just the way she didn't care who he was. The way her voice didn't tremble. The way, for one fleeting moment, someone in this noisy, lying world had told him the truth. Chapter 1. The Lemonade War. There was no breeze that afternoon. Just the kind of still, punishing heat that made sidewalks shimmer and tires stick to the road. A gust would have been a blessing, but the air in downtown Austin stood still, like it was watching. And she was right there, under it all, with a plastic cooler sweating beside her and a handwritten cardboard sign taped to the front of a wobbly folding table. Lemonade, $3.00. Cold, real, no nonsense. Her name was Sierra Bennett. 25, too smart for where she stood, too broke to be anywhere else. She had a degree that meant nothing without money, a heart that refused to give up, and a voice that refused to soften. She lifted another cup, poured the lemonade herself, pale yellow, no ice, no sugar tricks, just tart and honest. She handed it to a mom with 2 kids and smiled as if she hadn't just used her last roll of quarters to keep the cooler cold this morning. Enjoy, ma'am, and hey, if you don't like it, I give full refunds as long as you pour it back into the cup. She winked. The kids laughed. The mother chuckled, handed her a 5 and waved off the change. That was the good part, that fleeting 5 seconds where things felt decent. Then he came. Black suit, loafers that looked like they hated sidewalks, wristwatch that caught the sun just enough to flash in your eye. He was tall, but not in a clumsy way, more like the world always made space for him. Sierra didn't notice him at first. Not until he stopped, looked at the sign, then, without asking, picked up a cup, sniffed it, and took a sip. She paused mid-call to another potential customer and turned. "It'll be $3, she said. He frowned at the cup in his hand, made a face like he'd tasted a cheap joke. "3? It's lemonade. It's worth maybe $1. Sierra blinked. "Then spit it out." He looked up. Their eyes met, blue on brown, silence on fire. "What?" he said, clearly taken off guard. She didn't blink. "Spit it out. If it's not worth $3, don't drink it." A college student walking by stopped to watch. A biker at the stoplight smirked. "You already drank it," Sierra said, voice steady. "So now it's mine or yours. If it's mine, I'll take it back. If it's yours, you owe me $3. Simple math." The man stared at her like she'd just slapped him. "I could buy this whole block," he muttered, reaching slowly into his pocket. "Great," Sierra said. "Start with the tip jar." He pulled out a 20 and dropped it on the table. "Keep the change," he said flatly. "Thanks," she replied, pocketing it without blinking. "Come back any time for a free lesson in capitalism." He didn't smile, but he didn't argue either. He turned, walked back to a sleek black car idling at the curb, and got in. Sierra didn't watch him go. Because people like that, they didn't come back. They were rich, polished, probably on their way to some conference where people drank sparkling water and applauded each other for saying nothing. But inside that car, the man, Ethan Ward, CEO of WardTech, a man who hadn't been challenged in years, sat for a long minute before starting the engine. She didn't know his name. Didn't know he owned the building right behind her. Didn't know the 20 he dropped was less than he tipped his barista. But she did know one thing. She didn't owe him anything. And maybe that's what got to him. That night, Sierra closed up late. She stacked her cups, wiped down the table, counted her cash in silence. It wasn't much, but it was hers. And as she walked home with the cooler bumping behind her on squeaky wheels, she tried, really tried, not to think about the guy in the suit. But somewhere, between mile 4 and the blister forming on her heel, she realized something. That man hadn't laughed, hadn't smirked, hadn't even looked embarrassed. Just curious. And curiosity from someone like him? That was never the end. It was just the start of something, paid in silence. The first sign came in the form of an email. Sierra was hunched over the kitchen counter at 1:12 a.m. surrounded by unopened bills, her fingertips sticky from lemon pulp she hadn't scrubbed off properly. The apartment fan clicked every 5 seconds, and her mother was asleep in the other room. He was just about to shut her laptop when the subject line caught her eye. Payment received, tuition balance cleared. She froze, stared, clicked. The balance she'd been trying to scrape together for the last 8 months? $14,280.34. Now read, paid in full. She blinked. Refreshed the page. Still there. Her heart pounded. No name, no receipt trail, just a line at the bottom. Anonymous donor. Sierra stood up so fast the chair screeched. This had to be a mistake. Some system glitch. No one pays off another person's tuition without a name, a reason, or a warning. Unless, her jaw tightened. Unless he did. The man in the suit. The one who looked at her like she was an equation he couldn't solve. Who tossed her a 20 like it weighed more than it did. Who drove away like he wasn't done. She didn't sleep that night. The next morning, Sierra was already on the university campus before the offices opened. She sat on the cold concrete steps outside the admin building, arms folded tight, a coffee gone cold in her hands. By 8:01, she was standing at the bursar's desk. "I need to speak to someone about my tuition," she said flatly. The woman behind the glass smiled. "Let me guess, you're Sierra Bennett?" Sierra blinked. "Yeah." The woman tapped a few keys. "You're all cleared. Congratulations." "I didn't pay it," Sierra said. "I need to know who did." The clerk gave a polite shrug. "Anonymous donation. We see it sometimes. Maybe a scholarship, maybe a sponsor. Could be a random act of kindness." "It wasn't random," Sierra muttered, mostly to herself. The clerk tilted her head. Well, whoever it was, they believe in you. Sierra walked out of that building not with relief but with fire. She didn't want anyone believing in her from behind tinted glass and locked doors. She didn't want favors wrapped in silence. She wanted to look him in the eye and demand the one thing he hadn't offered her yet, the truth. The headquarters of Ward Enterprises stood like a steel monument in the middle of downtown. 30 floors of glass, ambition, and air conditioning set permanently to 65 degrees. It didn't look like a place that gave handouts. It looked like a place where dreams went to get monetized. Sierra walked into the marble-floored lobby with her shoulders back and a storm in her chest. Her lemonade-stained t-shirt had been swapped for a clean button-up and jeans, just enough to get her past the door. The receptionist looked up from her desk. "Hi, I'm looking for..." I don't know his name, but he wore a black suit, expensive watch, brown hair, blue eyes, walked like a stock price. The woman blinked. Sierra held up her hands. "Look, I know that sounds crazy, but he bought lemonade from me 2 days ago and..." "Miss, are you looking for Mr. Ward?" Sierra hesitated. "Is that him?" The woman gave a tight smile. "Top floor." An elevator opened behind her. Sierra walked in and pressed the button marked PH. The numbers lit up one by one, each ding echoing louder than it should have. When the doors opened, she stepped into a floor that smelled like success and silence. Minimalist furniture, walls made of windows, a skyline view of the city that made you feel both infinite and insignificant. And then there he was, standing by the window, hands in his pockets, eyes locked on something only he could see. She didn't announce herself. He turned. Recognition flickered across his face like a switch. But not surprise, more like inevitability. Sierra folded her arms. "You paid my tuition." A pause. Then he said quietly, "Yes." No permission, no heads up, just paid it like you were buying another bottle of lemonade. He didn't flinch. "Would you have accepted it if I asked?" "That's not the point," she snapped. "What is?" "That you don't get to walk into my life and fix things without asking." He studied her like she was still the girl on the sidewalk. "I wasn't trying to fix anything," he said. "I was trying to make sure you didn't have to break more than you already had." Sierra's voice cracked at the edges. "I don't want your charity." It wasn't charity. She stared at him. Then what was it? He took a breath, walked closer. Not close enough to intimidate, just close enough to mean it. It was payment. For what? For the only thing that's made me feel human in years. Sierra froze. He looked away. "You called me out. You didn't flinch. You didn't bow. You didn't care who I was." "You still don't," she whispered. He smiled slightly. "I know. That's why I couldn't stop thinking about you." Silence stretched between them. Heavy, unsure, charged. Finally, she stepped back. "I didn't need your help." He nodded once. "Then consider it a bad investment." She turned, walked to the elevator, and pressed the button with shaking fingers. Before the doors closed, she looked back at him once more. His hands were still in his pockets. But for a man who owned everything, he looked like he'd just lost something. Chapter 3. Your pity tastes like money. The air outside the elevator felt heavier than the one she'd just left. Sierra stepped onto the sidewalk in front of Ward Enterprises, the sliding glass doors whooshing shut behind her like they were glad to be rid of her. The city roared as usual, cars honking, people rushing, but everything felt muted. Her heart was still thudding like a protest sign in her chest. She didn't remember the walk back. All she knew was that the further she got from that skyscraper, the more she wanted to scream. He said he didn't mean it as charity. He said it was a bad investment. But what he didn't say was what it really was. Power. A man like him could write off $14,000 0 cents with the click of a pen. For her, it was every bottle she sold, every dollar she saved, every corner of her life she cut, just to keep one dream alive. And now, thanks to one man and one decision, that dream didn't feel like hers anymore. That night, she didn't go home. She went to the park, sat under the same tree she used to read under during finals week. Same patch of grass, same open sky. Only now, instead of a book in her lap, she had a storm inside her she didn't know how to calm. Her phone buzzed twice. Ethan Ward, missed call? She stared at the screen, then shoved it back in her backpack like it had insulted her. You don't get to barge in and rewrite my story, she thought. Not even if your heart's in the right place. Especially not then. Ethan sat alone in his penthouse, city lights flickering against the glass wall behind him like restless ghosts. His tie was gone, his sleeves rolled, his dinner untouched. He hadn't meant to make her angry, but he had, and for the first time in years, someone's anger actually mattered to him. He poured a drink, let it sit on the table untouched. The truth was, Sierra Bennett had disrupted his life in a way no boardroom, no merger, no competitor ever had. Not because she was loud, not because she was poor, but because she was right. She didn't need saving, she needed someone who didn't try to fix her. And he hadn't been that man. The next day, Sierra went back to her lemonade stand. Same corner, same cooler, same folding table with a taped-up sign. But this time, she didn't smile. Not until an old man with a gentle face dropped a $5 and winked. Best lemonade on this side of Texas. Thanks, she said, and meant it. She was refilling cups when a shadow fell across her table. She didn't need to look up. I'm not in the mood, she said flatly. Ethan stepped forward. Then I'll keep it brief. No offense, she said, still not looking up. But you don't strike me as the brief type. He placed a 20 on the table and slid a cup toward him. Just buying lemonade. Right, because you're really thirsty in that $1,000 suit. He didn't flinch. Thirst isn't always about water. She finally looked at him. Is that your version of an apology? No. That's my version of starting over. She narrowed her eyes. Why, she asked. Why me? Why show up here? Why pay off my debt? Why care? He looked down at the cup in his hand, then back up. Because when I met you, I saw someone who didn't blink when life threw dirt. Someone who made $3 feel like 30. And somewhere in the middle of all that, I forgot how to be human. You reminded me. Sierra leaned back, arms crossed. I'm not a therapy session. I'm not some wounded bird that makes millionaires feel like men. I know, he said. That's what scares me. She blinked. Ethan held the cup in both hands now, like it grounded him. I've built towers out of glass and steel, he said. But you? You built a business out of lemons and pride, and somehow, that's stronger than anything I've ever built. For a second, the sidewalk went quiet. Then Sierra exhaled and shook her head. You really are full of it. He smiled. Probably. She looked at the $20 bill still on the table. And you're overpaying, again. He stepped back. Just a little. Keep the change. No, she said, sliding the bill back toward him, because I'm not for sale. Ethan's expression didn't change. Neither am I. She hesitated. Then, slowly, she reached under the table and pulled out a chilled bottle. Handed it to him. This one's free, she said, but not because you're rich, because I'm stubborn. He took it. Their fingers brushed, and for the first time, the silence between them didn't feel like a battle. It felt like something waiting to bloom. Chapter 4: The Storm in the Shelter. The forecast had promised sunshine, but Austin skies had a reputation for lying. By mid-afternoon, the clouds were stacking like arguments, dark, swollen, ready to burst. Sierra felt it in her chest before she felt it on her skin. The wind shifted, the light dimmed, and with the first low roll of thunder, people began to scatter. She stayed. Because when you live by what you can carry in a cooler, every hour counts. A few drops turned into a fine mist. Then the sky cracked open and poured without warning. Sierra scrambled to cover her cups with a plastic sheet. Her makeshift table wobbled under the pressure. The wind slapped against her clothes, her hair, By the time she zipped the cooler shut, she was soaked through. She reached for the handle and started dragging it toward the bus stop. One wheel jammed, the other barely turning. The rain was cold, sharp, unforgiving. She didn't look up until a sleek black car rolled to a stop just ahead of her, headlights hazy in the downpour. The window rolled down. Of course it was him, Ethan Ward. He didn't smile, didn't try to charm. He just said evenly, "You're going to catch pneumonia." She kept walking. "I'm good." He opened the door from inside. The passenger seat was dry, leather, warm. She stared at it like it was a trap. "I'm not getting in," she said. "You're not obligated," he replied. Sierra's grip tightened on the cooler handle. Thunder cracked overhead. "Don't you have somewhere to be?" she asked, arms shaking. He didn't look away. "Right now, I'm exactly where I want to be." A beat passed, then another, and just like that, she cursed under her breath, hoisted the cooler into the back seat, and slid into the passenger's side. The door closed with a quiet click, sealing them in like it wasn't just rain outside, but another world entirely. The car was silent except for the rhythm of the wipers. Her jeans dripped water onto the floor mat. Her curls clung to her neck and cheekbones. He offered her a towel from the console. She took it, wiped her face, rubbed her arms, then turned to him. "Let me guess. Now you want to talk?" "No," he said. "I want to drive." She raised a brow. "So, this isn't one of those movie scenes where the rich guy teaches the poor girl a life lesson?" "If it is," he said, pulling onto the road, "you're the one teaching it." The rain painted streaks across the windshield like veins. The world outside was gray and blurred, but the cabin of the car felt strangely still, like nothing could touch them in here. Sierra glanced at the GPS on the dashboard. It wasn't active. "Where are we going?" "Someplace dry," he said. "That narrows it down." He didn't respond, and she didn't push. After 10 minutes, they pulled into a small covered parking lot outside a diner, one of those old Texas places with chipped blue paint and a flickering neon sign that simply read, "Eat." He stepped out first, ran around to open her door without asking. She stepped out, met his eyes. "You know I'm not impressed by chivalry, right?" He gave a small smile. "It's not for show." Inside, the diner was half empty, smelled like coffee and overfried hash browns. The waitress looked like she'd been working there for 40 years and didn't trust men in suits. They sat in the booth by the window, still dripping. He didn't seem to care about the water on his blazer. Sierra unzipped her hoodie and ran her hands through her damp curls. "Why do you keep showing up?" she asked. He didn't answer right away, just stirred the coffee he hadn't yet ordered cream for. Finally, "Because you don't need me." She blinked. "That's your reason?" He looked at her, and for once there was no businesslike veneer in his eyes, no sharp edge, just truth. "I'm surrounded by people who want something, a seat at the table, a name, a favor. You don't even want conversation." Sierra tilted her head, considering him. "So, you're bored then?" "No," he paused. "I'm curious, and maybe a little desperate to remember what it's like to be looked at like a man, not a bank account." She went quiet. The waitress brought 2 mugs of coffee and slid them onto the table like she was watching a silent film. Sierra wrapped her hands around hers, letting the warmth soak into her bones. Ethan leaned forward, elbows on the table. "What's your story?" he asked. "Which version?" He waited. She stared out the window for a moment. "My dad left when I was 10. My mom works nights at the hospital. I work days on the street. I got into college, but couldn't afford to stay full-time. So I sell lemonade so I can buy books and pay for my tuition. I make just enough to pretend I'm okay." Ethan's face didn't change, but something in his shoulders shifted. "Low. And still," she added, "I'd rather drown in rain than owe anyone anything." "I didn't want you to owe me," he said quietly. "I just wanted to matter." That hit harder than she expected. Sierra looked at him, really looked. For the first time, he didn't look powerful. He looked lonely, and she hated that it made her heart twist. The rain let up an hour later. He drove her home, dropped her off without asking for her address. Somehow, he already knew it. She didn't invite him in. But before closing the car door, she said, "You were right about one thing." "What's that?" "I don't need you." Then she paused, just long enough for the second part to land. But that doesn't mean I don't see you. The door closed gently. She walked up the steps. Ethan didn't drive away for a long time, because for the first time in years, someone had looked at him without flinching. And it wasn't because of what he owned. It was because of who he'd tried to be. When the rain came down, Chapter 5, a CEO's hands are not clean. There was something about the silence in his penthouse. It didn't echo. It suffocated. Ethan stood in front of the window, coffee untouched in his hand, staring down at the city like it might offer an answer if he looked hard enough. The rain had stopped hours ago, but something lingered in the air. Not weather, not tension, regret. He'd taken her home and watched her climb those steps, disappear behind a warped screen door, and still, she hadn't left his mind. Not when he opened his email. Not when he sat through a conference call where everyone's voices sounded like glass breaking in a vacuum. Not when Naomi, his top advisor and the city's most polished vulture, dropped into his office unannounced, tossed her hair over one shoulder, and said, "Rumor has it you've been keeping strange company lately." He didn't answer, because he was thinking about Sierra, and the way she looked at him when she said, "That doesn't mean I don't see you." He wondered if she knew what she'd done. Sierra's morning started with a knot in her stomach. It didn't help that her jeans hadn't fully dried and her sneakers still smelled like sidewalk puddles. She shoved her lemonade cooler onto the corner again. Her hands were sore. Her pride still sorer. Provomoto deo siere. But when she poured the first cup of the day, she didn't fake the smile. She didn't have to. The memory of Ethan's words still lingered like heat on her skin. I just wanted to matter. He didn't say it to charm. He said it like it was a confession he hadn't meant to make. And that was the problem. She was starting to see him not as a suit, not as a wallet, but as a man, and that terrified her. Later that day, she was back at the apartment, stuffing bills into a chipped ceramic bowl labeled rent, when she heard a knock. Not at the door, at her life. Because the moment she opened her laptop, a new email sat in her inbox. Subject, payment received, balance 0. She clicked. Another debt cleared. The restaurant where she worked nights had credited her account with 3 months back pay. A clerical error correction. She called her manager. He swore he didn't know what she was talking about, but Sierra knew. She knew that clerical error was spelled E-T-H-A-N. Her hands trembled as she closed the laptop, because this wasn't about money anymore. This was about control. She didn't text, didn't call. She showed up. They walked straight into the mirrored lobby of Ward Enterprises with fire in her lungs and mud still drying on her shoes. The receptionist looked up in alarm. "Do you have—" "You'll want to see me," Sierra snapped. 5 minutes later, she stood in Ethan's office doorway. His back was turned. He was pouring water into a glass like nothing in the world was on fire. "You said you wanted to matter," she said flatly. He turned slowly. "And you do, Ethan. But this? Clearing debts behind my back? That's not love. That's leverage." He set the glass down, calm. "I never meant to hurt you. That's the second time you've said that. And I'll keep saying it until you believe me." Sierra stepped forward. "Do you know what it feels like to fight for every dollar, every semester, every shift, only to wake up and find that someone decided to fix it for you like you were broken?" His voice was barely above a whisper. "You're not broken. Then stop treating me like I am." Silence. Ethan walked around his desk, now only a few feet away. "I wasn't trying to take anything from you," he said, "but I've spent so long building walls, I don't always know how to hand someone a ladder instead." Sierra stared at him, and for the first time she saw it. The grief in his eyes, the faint crack under the surface. "What happened to you?" she asked, softly now. He paused, then answered with something that sounded like gravel and glass. "I lost my daughter." The words hung between them like smoke. Sierra's breath caught. "I had her when I was 24, he said. "She was 7 when we lost her, to leukemia. My whole world, gone in a hospital room that still haunts my dreams." She sat down, not because she was tired, but because something in her knees had folded. "I didn't know," she whispered. You weren't supposed to. He stared at the glass of water on the desk. After that, I stopped feeling, stopped hoping. I thought if I just worked hard enough, built high enough, the silence wouldn't follow me. But it did, she said. He nodded once. And then you showed up, demanding $3 for lemonade like it was the last drop of dignity left in the city. She laughed, short, pained. He looked at her, then reached for something behind his desk. A photo frame. He handed it to her. The little girl had curls, eyes full of mischief, lemonade in hand. She would have liked you, he said. You remind me of her. Sierra felt her throat tighten. That's not fair. I know. She handed the photo back. He took it gently, like it was still breathing. When he looked at her again, his voice had changed. Sierra, I don't want to fix you. I just want to be someone you can lean on. When you choose to. She didn't speak for a long time. And then, slowly, she stood. I don't want to owe you, she said. You don't. I don't want pity. You'd fight it too hard anyway. She nodded once, then turned to leave, but paused at the door. Without turning around, she said, Your hands aren't clean, Ethan, but maybe, neither are mine. Then she walked out, and for the first time since his daughter died, Ethan felt something move in his chest that wasn't pain. It was possibility. Chapter 6, Lemon and Salt. The next day, Sierra didn't go straight to her usual corner. She needed space. Instead, she took the long way downtown, past the art walls off East 5th, past the taco truck with the hand-painted flames, past the bookstore cafe she used to study in before tuition buried her. The city looked the same, but something in her had shifted. Ethan's confession haunted her. At photo, those words, she would have liked you. It wasn't just grief in his eyes now. It was trust, vulnerability, and maybe the scariest part, the hope he didn't want to have again. And somehow she was the one who'd lit the match. She spent the morning making lemonade. Not at the table, not to sell, but at home, by hand. Her mother asked no questions. Just watched as Sierra squeezed each lemon like she was trying to wrestle clarity from it. By noon, she poured the finished batch into 2 old mason jars, wrapped them in a towel, and left. She didn't text. It didn't call. She just walked into Ward Enterprises with both jars in her bag and a beat in her chest that didn't feel like anger anymore. The receptionist looked up, but this time didn't stop her. He must have told them. She took the elevator alone, the fume of it grounding her more than it should have. When the doors opened, Ethan was at his desk, sleeves rolled, jacket on the chair behind him. He looked up, startled, but not surprised. Hi, she said. He pulled 1 jar from her bag and placed it on his desk. No invoices, no pity, just lemon and salt. He smiled softly. You came to sell lemonade to a CEO? No, she said. I came to tell you I've never seen someone more out of place in a luxury office than you last night, when you said you just wanted to be seen. He leaned back in his chair. Did you see me? He studied her, not with the usual CEO coldness, but with something warmer, quieter. You're hard to read, he said. Good, she replied. Keeps you from writing my story without asking. They sat there in the stillness, sipping lemonade like old friends instead of 2 people from opposite ends of the world. Then Sierra said, Come with me. Where? Somewhere you don't own. That evening, they met outside a local night market. Rows of pop-up tents, string lights, families laughing over churros and street tacos. It smelled like spice and smoke and comfort. Ethan looked like a misplaced puzzle piece in his pressed shirt and too expensive watch. Sierra, in a worn denim jacket and messy bun, didn't apologize for dragging him here. You ever had al pastor? She asked, walking ahead. I don't think I have. You're about to. She ordered for him. No substitutions, no chef's name behind the dish. Just a paper plate, salsa dribbling over the side, and 1 napkin to survive it all. He took a bite and coughed. You okay, Mr. Ward? Fine, he said hoarsely, just vivid flavors. She laughed. You mean real ones. He gave her a look, then took another bite. The second one went better. Later they stood near a stall selling handmade jewelry. A guitarist played in the corner. Children danced without rhythm, without shame. Sierra tapped her foot against the pavement. "I used to come here before exams," she said. "When I couldn't breathe, something about being around people who were just living." Ethan nodded. They didn't speak for a while, just watched. Then, when the guitarist started strumming an old Spanish love song, Sierra surprised herself by holding out a hand. "What are you doing?" he asked. "Seeing if the CEO has rhythm." He took her hand, unsure. He pulled him gently into the makeshift open space where others had started to sway. They danced. Not well, not gracefully, but honestly. He stumbled at first. She stepped on his foot once. He winced. But neither of them let go. "Okay," he whispered. "I definitely don't have rhythm." She grinned. "You're doing better than I thought." He tightened his grip on her waist just slightly. "You're dangerous when you smile. You're worse when you mean it." For the first time, they didn't feel like two mismatched people pretending to belong. They felt like something possible. Afterward, they walked side by side through the last row of market lights. Sierra stopped in front of a mural, one she'd always loved. A woman painted in blues and yellows, her eyes closed, face lifted, wind in her hair. "She looks like she finally stopped running," Ethan said. Sierra looked at him. "I used to think standing still meant getting stuck," she said. "But now, maybe it just means you've found something worth staying for." He turned toward her slowly. "And have you?" She didn't answer. But the look in her eyes said maybe. And maybe was a start. Whispers in the boardroom. Ethan always believed his empire was built on silence. Not the comforting kind, the corporate kind. The silence of closed-door meetings. Non-disclosure agreements. Smiles that meant yes but promised nothing. But even he underestimated how fast silence could be broken. It started with a whisper, then a hallway stare, then a message on his personal phone from Naomi Stanford. "She's becoming a liability." He didn't reply, because deep down he already knew what was coming. The boardroom of Ward Enterprises was 30 feet long and colder than most winter nights. Glass on one side, power on the other. Everyone in tailored suits. Everyone watching. Ethan sat at the head of the table. Naomi, sleek, poised, and practiced, leaned forward, fingers steepled like she was building a temple out of malice. "I'm not here to question your personal life," she began. Everyone knew that meant she was about to. But when public rumors began to swirl around our CEO and a sidewalk vendor, she let the words linger. "It becomes a discussion of optics." Ethan didn't blink. "Define optics." Naomi's smile was razor thin. "Perception, influence, control. The press will eat it up. And your partners, Ethan, they don't like distractions." He leaned back in his chair. "You mean they don't like women who can't be bought?" A murmur passed through the room. Naomi's eyes hardened. "I mean we're 6 weeks from a merger that could double our global valuation, and your name is trending on gossip blogs, not for innovation, but for romance." Ethan stood. The room fell silent. "If any of you think I'm going to choose a headline over a human being, feel free to walk out now." No one moved. But Naomi's voice dropped lower. "She doesn't belong in this world, Ethan." He stared at her. "Maybe that's the best part." That same morning, Sierra noticed it too. At the university cafe, 2 students whispered when she walked past. At her night job, her manager gave her a look that said, "I read the news but didn't ask." Even her lemonade stand wasn't immune. A woman with an expensive purse leaned over the table and said, "Is it true? You're dating Ethan Ward?" Sierra kept pouring. "Would you like lemonade or a story?" The woman smirked. "I'll take both." But Sierra didn't bite. Because the truth was, she didn't know what they were. Not yet. That night, Ethan showed up unannounced. She was still in her work shirt, exhaustion clinging to her like sweat. "Bad time?" he asked. She didn't answer, just opened the door wider. He stepped in and stood awkwardly in her narrow living room, surrounded by the hum of an old fridge and the scent of lemon and soap. "Your world's louder than mine now," she said, crossing her arms. "I know. You could have warned me. I didn't want to scare you. You didn't want me to run." He looked at her. "Would you have?" She didn't lie. Maybe. Ethan stepped closer. "They'll talk, Sierra, and they'll judge. Not because you're not enough, but because you're more than they understand." She stared at him. "And what about you?" "Not scared of them." "But I am," she whispered. "Not of the gossip, of you, of what it means to matter to someone like you, and still be expected to disappear when it gets inconvenient." Ethan's jaw tightened. "I'm not asking you to disappear." "Then tell me why your board thinks I'm a mistake." He was quiet. Because some wounds were made in rooms she'd never been invited into. But finally he said, "Because they think love should come with conditions, contracts, resumes." She laughed bitterly. "And all I've got is a cooler and a backbone." He stepped forward, touched her hand. "No," he said, "you've got a soul that doesn't bend." She wanted to believe him. She wanted to melt into that voice, that steadiness. But she couldn't forget the world waiting outside that door. So she said, "Tell them to look me in the eye before they write me off." And Ethan, without hesitation, answered, "I will." The next morning, Sierra woke to a message that made her heart stop. Ethan Ward, CEO of Ward Enterprises, confirms relationship with local student entrepreneur Sierra Bennett. Underneath was a photo. Him, her, walking side by side through the night market. No suits, no filters. Just two people who didn't fit, trying to. And the caption? "Sometimes the greatest risk a man can take is to be seen with someone real." She didn't know whether to smile or cry. But for once, she didn't feel small. She felt dangerous. Chapter 8, The Lemon Stand He Bought Without Asking. The stand was gone. That was the first thing Sierra noticed when she turned the corner. No cooler, no folding table, no cardboard sign with 3 crooked words in permanent marker. Lemonade. $3, 0 cents. Just a slick, polished cart with chrome wheels, clean signage, and a tiny engraved plaque that read, "Ward Foundation Micro Grant, 001. It hit her like a punch to the chest. The new stand looked perfect. Sterile. Soulless. She stood there for a full minute, unmoving. People passed by, no one stopped. No one knew what that beat-up table had meant, that it had been hers, that it had been her. She turned on her heel and walked. Fast. Straight to the only man who could have done it. When Sierra burst into Ethan's office, he wasn't surprised. But this time she didn't hesitate. She slammed a laminated receipt onto his desk. The grant record, pulled from the vendor registry. His signature was at the bottom. "You bought my life," she said. Ethan stood, slowly. "I upgraded your setup." "No," she snapped. "You replaced it." He looked confused. "Sierra, I was trying to help." "No," she cut in. "You were trying to own." The words landed between them like thunder. Ethan stepped back, his jaw tightening. "That's not fair, isn't it?" Her voice cracked. "You paid off my tuition. You cleared my rent. You bought the damn restaurant where I work. And now, you erased the only thing I built with my own hands." He ran a hand through his hair. It was falling apart. "It was mine." Silence. The kind that hurts more than shouting. Sierra turned toward the door. He said softly, "You matter to me, Sierra." She stopped, not because of the words, but because of how tired they sounded. "Then stop fixing me," he whispered. "I don't know how." She turned, eyes filled with tears. "Then maybe we don't work." It was the first time she saw fear in him. Real fear. But he didn't try to stop her. Not with a plea. Not with another gift. Not this time. Sierra didn't go home that night. She wandered, past closed cafes, past the bookstore she used to love, past her old apartment on the east side. She ended up in the same park she always did, under the oak tree, knees pulled to her chest, forehead resting on them. She cried, not because she didn't love him, but because she did. And love, when it's handed with strings, starts to feel like a leash. Ethan sat in his office long after the lights shut off. The city blinked outside like 1,000 questions. Naomi had texted twice, something about damage control. He didn't answer. Instead, he pulled open a drawer and stared at the photo of his daughter. "I'm doing it again, aren't I?" he whispered. The photo didn't respond, but inside he already knew. He was trying to protect, but he was also trying to control. He was trying to love, but he hadn't yet learned to trust. The next morning, Sierra stood in front of the newsstand. Still shiny, still not hers. But instead of walking away, she picked up a marker and wrote on the metal edge, "Real lemonade, real woman, no charity." And with that, she opened the cooler, started pouring. The first customer smiled. "I like this one better," he said. She didn't, but she would make it hers, on her terms. One cup at a time. Chapter 9. When lemonade tastes like forgiveness. It wasn't the taste. It was the silence. That's what hit him first when Ethan walked up to the stand she hadn't invited him back to. No one said his name. No one whispered. No photos, no headlines. Just Sierra, wiping down the counter in a faded t-shirt, her curls twisted back with a pencil, sunlight kissing her cheekbones like forgiveness trying to land. He stood at the edge of the sidewalk, unsure. The man who made billion-dollar deals couldn't take one more step. Not until she looked up. And when she did, it wasn't anger on her face. It was something softer. Sadness, maybe. Or something more dangerous. Understanding. "You want lemonade?" she asked quietly. Ethan nodded once. He poured without drama, no sarcasm, no performance. Just hands that knew this movement better than they knew him. When she handed him the cup, he didn't take a sip. He held it in both hands like he was asking it a question. "You said once," she murmured, "that thirst isn't always about water." He looked up, met her eyes. "And you were right," she added. He exhaled. But it wasn't relief. It was shame. "I'm sorry," he said. She didn't answer right away. Then, "For which part?" He swallowed hard. "For thinking love was the same as safety. For trying to buy peace when I should have earned your trust. For forgetting that something doesn't have to be broken to be rebuilt." Sierra leaned forward on the counter, arms crossed. "Why did you really buy the stand?" He looked at the cup, then back at her. "Because I thought if I replaced the things in your life that were fragile, I could keep you. And now?" He set the lemonade down gently. "Now I know you were never mine to keep, only to choose." She studied him. His eyes weren't guarded. His suit was wrinkled. His hands, the same ones that built empires, were shaking slightly. She stepped around the counter, stood in front of him, close enough to smell the lemon on his breath, close enough to touch him. But she didn't. Instead, she asked, "So, what do you choose now, Ethan?" He didn't hesitate. "You," he said, "even if you don't need me, even if I can't fix a single thing, I still choose you." Her throat tightened, because this time, he wasn't offering anything. Not money, not solutions. It was himself. She reached for the cup, took a sip, and smiled. "You finally made it right," she said. "The lemonade?" "No," she said softly, "the apology." That night, they didn't go anywhere fancy. They sat on a rooftop 2 blocks away from her apartment, shared fries from a paper bag, watched the city breathe. Ethan loosened his tie. Sierra rested her chin on her knees. "You ever think about your daughter?" she asked gently. "All the time." "What do you miss most?" He looked up at the stars, as if she might be hiding there. "She used to make me lemonade," he said. "It was terrible." Sierra laughed, and it cracked something in both of them. "But she'd bring it to me when I was working. Said it was magic juice that kept my brain alive." Sierra grew quiet. "Maybe she knew something you didn't." He turned toward her. "Like what?" "This love doesn't have to look powerful to be permanent." He nodded, then reached for her hand. Not to pull, not to lead, but just to hold. She let him. Chapter 10. The Proposal That Had No Ring. The morning air was sharp with spring, but soft sunlight slipped across Sierra's windowsill like it was asking permission to come in. She stood barefoot in her kitchen, pouring orange juice into 2 chipped glasses. The only set she owned that didn't match. One had a faded cartoon cactus. The other just said, "Keep going." Ethan sat at the tiny table, jacket draped on the back of a chair, sleeves rolled up, eyes tracing, the way she moved like he was memorizing her. Because he had never seen a woman cook eggs with this much quiet defiance. "Do you always hum when you fry things?" he asked. She smirked. "Only when I'm pretending I'm not nervous." He leaned forward, curious. "Nervous?" Sierra slid the plate onto the table and sat. "You're still here." Ethan tilted his head. "You thought I'd leave?" "No," she said. "I thought you'd wake up, remember who you are, and run." He didn't smile. Instead, he said, "I remember exactly who I am when I'm with you, and that's why I stay." Later that day, they walked the city like tourists in their own story. No headlines, no whispers, just the two of them and a sky that refused to cloud. They wandered past the mural where they'd danced, past the bookstore where she once dreamed about writing her own ending. And when they passed her old lemonade corner, the real one, not the Ward-branded replacement, she paused. The sign she'd written in Sharpie had been peeled off the pole, but the ghost of it was still there. She reached out, traced it gently. "I thought that stand was the best thing I'd ever built," she whispered. Ethan stepped beside her. "It was," he said, "until you built a life around it." She looked at him, and there was something in his eyes, not the gleam of a man who'd conquered markets, but the quiet, steady look of a man ready to surrender, not to defeat, but to truth. He reached into his pocket, pulled out nothing, not a box, not a ring, just his empty hand. "I don't have anything to offer you today," he said. "No diamonds, no speeches, just this." She blinked. "Just what?" He held out his open palm. "Just me." And in that moment, it was more than enough. Sierra didn't cry. She didn't laugh. She just placed her hand in his and whispered, "Okay." And that was the answer he'd been waiting for. They didn't call it a proposal. They didn't post photos. There was no hashtag, no guest list, just a promise, a choice, made not under chandeliers or behind velvet ropes, but under the faded light of a mural where 2 worlds finally learned how to hold each other. When love doesn't buy you, it stays anyway. They didn't throw a wedding, not in the way the world expected. There were no chandeliers, no RSVP cards dipped in gold, no aerial drone shots sweeping over vineyards. Just a small park near the corner where she once sold lemonade. A borrowed white dress that smelled like her mother's closet, and a man in a shirt that still had coffee stains near the cuff. Ethan Ward, the man who once bought companies with a glance, was now just Ethan. The man who held Sierra's hand like it was the only contract that mattered. They said their vows under an oak tree. No microphone, no crowd, just words. Real ones. "I don't promise to fix your problems," Ethan said, "only to sit with you in them." "I don't promise to need you," Sierra whispered, "only to choose you, on the days I could do it all alone and still want you there." And that was it. That was the marriage. No ring could hold more meaning. Weeks later, the cooler was still in her living room. It didn't sell lemonade anymore, but it held the receipts from every chapter of their love. The marker she used to write her first sign. A photo of the broken table he tried to replace. A napkin from their taco night. The empty mason jar he once sipped from like it was holy. Because in a world where people measure success by followers and dollars, they had built something else. Something small, something quiet, something you could never buy, only build. Real love does not arrive dressed in grand gestures. Doesn't always come with rings or speeches or the perfect words. Sometimes it shows up in the rain, in the way someone walks beside you without asking for applause, in the way they stop fixing and start listening, in the way they hand you their heart with nothing but a whisper. I choose you, still, always. And if you're still here, maybe you've felt something like this. Maybe you've loved someone the world told you didn't fit. Maybe you've been the one who had nothing except dignity. Maybe you've watched someone try to save you and realized all you wanted was someone who saw you. If this story touched something in you, tell us. Not for likes, but for the people out there still waiting to believe love can be real. Because sometimes lemonade is just lemonade. And sometimes it's everything.